Marcus Bell was still awake at 3:47 in the morning when the code finally compiled without a single error. And if you stay until the end of this story, you will understand exactly why that moment mattered more than any boardroom, any title, and any paycheck ever could. Before you keep watching, hit like and subscribe, because what happened to Marcus over the next 18 months will make you question everything you think you know about who really builds the things that change the world. This is his story. Marcus was 34 years old, a single father raising his 6-year-old daughter Nia in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Charlotte, North Carolina. He had no engineering degree from a prestigious university, no family money, no mentor who opened doors for him. What he had was a mind that never stopped working, and a promise he made to his daughter the night her mother left, that no matter what it took, he would build her a life where she never had to wonder if her father would show up. Nia's mother, Renee, had left when Nia was 18 months old, not out of cruelty exactly, but out of exhaustion with a life that never seemed to loosen its grip no matter how hard either of them worked. She sent a card on birthdays for the first 2 years, then the cards stopped coming, and Marcus stopped waiting for them. He never spoke badly of her to Nia. He simply became, quietly and without ceremony, both parents at once. The one who braided hair badly but with enormous patience. The one who learned to make macaroni and cheese from scratch, because the boxed kind made Nia's stomach hurt. The one who sat outside her preschool classroom door on her first day longer than any of the other parents, unwilling to leave until he was sure she had stopped crying. He had grown up in a household where nobody used the word engineer out loud, where computers were things other families had, where his own father worked 2 jobs and still came home too tired to help with homework he did not understand himself. Marcus taught himself to read circuit diagrams the way other kids taught themselves guitar chords, from library books with cracked spines, borrowed twice a month because the branch near his childhood home only let you keep technical manuals for 14 days. He never once thought of it as impressive. He thought of it as the only door he could find that was not already locked. 6 years earlier, Marcus had been hired at Solon Dynamics as a junior systems technician, a job so far beneath his abilities that his first supervisor assumed he was there to fix printers. He kept his head down. He fixed printers. He also, in the evenings after Nia was asleep, taught himself machine learning architecture from library books and free online courses, sketching diagrams on the backs of old grocery receipts because he could not afford a fresh notebook. Solon Dynamics was in trouble back then. Their flagship product, an industrial automation platform called Orion, was failing. It crashed under load. It misread sensor data. It cost the company 3 major contracts in a single quarter. Executives flew in consultants from Boston and Austin. None of them fixed it. Marcus fixed it, quietly, on his own time, without being asked, because he could not stand watching a broken system limp along when he could see exactly where the fracture was. He rewrote the core scheduling algorithm in 11 days. He did not do it for credit. He did it because Nia needed shoes that fit, and he was terrified of losing a job that, however small, kept a roof over her head. When his supervisor found the fix, he panicked. Then he took it straight to the VP of engineering, a man named Gary Halbrook, and told him a junior technician in the server room had solved what a team of 6 senior engineers could not. Halbrook was impressed, and to his credit, he promoted Marcus on the spot. But something else happened that day too, something smaller and quieter that would echo for years. Halbrook filed the patent application for the rebuilt Orion engine under the company's name, with Halbrook listed as lead inventor, and Marcus listed 3 lines down as a contributing technician. Marcus was so grateful for the promotion, so relieved to finally be making enough to move Nia into a real apartment with a working heater, that he signed the paperwork without reading past the first page. It was the only real mistake he ever made, and it would cost him more than he could have imagined. For the next 5 years, Marcus became the invisible engine of Solon Dynamics. Every major breakthrough in the Orion platform ran through his hands first. He built the predictive maintenance module that saved the company $11 million in its first year. He built the safety override system that prevented a catastrophic failure at a client's manufacturing plant in Ohio, an incident that never made headlines specifically because Marcus caught it 8 hours before it happened. He trained junior engineers who were later promoted above him. He mentored a bright, ambitious young man named Trevor Enos, who joined the company fresh out of a computer science program at a well-known university, all polish and confidence and the kind of easy charm that made executives comfortable in a way Marcus, quiet and careful, and black in rooms where he was usually the only one, never quite achieved no matter how much he accomplished. Marcus did not resent Trevor. He liked him, actually. He spent countless late nights walking Trevor through the architecture of systems Marcus himself had built from nothing, explaining not just what the code did, but why it was structured that way, the philosophy behind it, the scars from every failure that had taught him each lesson. Trevor took excellent notes. Trevor asked excellent questions. Marcus told himself he was building the next generation, that this was what leadership meant, that lifting someone else up did not diminish his own light. Then, 18 months before the story you are watching begins, Gary Halbrook retired, and Solon Dynamics brought in a new CEO named Ronald Vance, a man who had made his name doing hostile efficiency reviews of mid-sized tech firms before selling them off in pieces. Vance did not believe in sentiment. He believed in metrics, headcount ratios, and the optics of a leadership team that photographed well for the annual report. Within his first month, he commissioned what he called a talent density audit, a review of every engineer's title, credentials, visible output, and public-facing contribution to the company's story. Marcus's file, on paper, looked unremarkable. No advanced degree, no conference talks, no public GitHub contributions, because everything he had ever built belonged to Solon Dynamics and was locked behind corporate walls. No patents in his name, because his name sat 3 lines down on a document he had signed without reading 5 years earlier. Trevor's file on paper looked spectacular. A degree from a respected program, 2 public conference presentations, both of which had been built directly from frameworks Marcus taught him. A patent filing from the previous year for an optimization layer Trevor had proposed, and Marcus had spent 4 months actually building. Vance called it aligning the engineering org with visible excellence. What it meant, in practice, was that 6 months ago, in a 15-minute meeting Marcus was given no warning for, Ronald Vance told him that his position was being restructured, and that Solon Dynamics was moving in a new technical direction, one that required, in his exact words, a stronger public engineering brand. Marcus asked, as calmly as he could manage with his pulse hammering in his ears, what exactly about his performance had prompted the decision. Vance slid a single sheet of paper across the desk, a summary of the audit, full of categories, like formal credentialing, external visibility, and brand alignment, none of which contained a single line about the $11 million saved, the catastrophic failure prevented in Ohio, or the 6 years of systems that had never once gone down on his watch. "This isn't personal, Marcus," Vance said, not looking up from his tablet. "It's just where the org needs to go." Marcus wanted to ask him whether he had even read the file, whether he understood that the visible excellence he was chasing had been built, brick by brick, by the very man he was firing. He said none of it. He had a daughter to feed, and a mortgage-sized rent payment due in 9 days. And men, like Vance, did not lose sleep over the difference between silence and surrender. Trevor Enos was named the new lead systems architect that same week. He sent Marcus a text that evening that read, "This isn't right. I tried to say something." And Marcus, staring at his phone in a parking lot with Nia's booster seat empty in the back because he had not yet found the courage to pick her up and lie to her face, did not respond for 3 days. Marcus was walked to his desk by a security guard he had known for 4 years, a man named Dale who could not meet his eyes, and given 11 minutes to clear out 6 years of his life into a cardboard box. Dale carried the box to Marcus's car without being asked, set it gently on the back seat, and said only, "You built the thing that keeps this whole place running, man." Everybody in that server room knows it, even if nobody upstairs will say it out loud. It was the only honest sentence anyone said to Marcus that entire day. The drive home that day was the longest 30 minutes of Marcus's life. He sat in his car outside Nia's after-school program for 20 minutes, before he could make his face calm enough to walk in and smile at her. She ran to him the way she always did, arms out, and asked if they could get ice cream because she had gotten a gold star in reading. He said yes. He always said yes to that kind of thing, even when, especially when, he had no idea how he was going to pay rent in 3 weeks. The months that followed were the hardest of Marcus's adult life. He applied to 43 engineering positions. He was rejected from 31 of them without so much as an interview, his resume, without a degree or a patent to anchor it, sliding past automated filters that had no way of measuring what he actually knew. He got interviews at 6 companies. In 4 of those interviews, he was asked, gently but unmistakably, why a man with his level of self-taught skill had never pursued formal credentials, a question that always seemed to carry an unspoken assumption underneath it about who deserved to be trusted with hard problems. In one interview, a hiring manager spent 20 minutes quizzing him on textbook algorithms Marcus had not touched in years, the kind of academic exercises that had little to do with the real, messy, load-bearing systems he had spent 6 years keeping alive. And Marcus watched the man's interest visibly cool with every hesitation, as though hesitation itself were proof of incompetence rather than simply the honest pause of someone who had learned his craft in server rooms instead of lecture halls. He did not get an offer from any of them. He took work where he could find it. Freelance contract debugging for small businesses, fixing point-of-sale systems for a chain of local restaurants, tutoring a handful of computer science students online in the evenings for $20 an hour. He sold his car and bought a 15-year-old sedan with cash to free up money for Nia's school supplies. He told her, every single night, that everything was fine, that Daddy was just working on something new, and every single night after she fell asleep he sat at the kitchen table with a spreadsheet of numbers that refused to add up. There was one night, 4 months into the search for work, when Marcus sat at the kitchen table after Nia had fallen asleep and opened an envelope he had been avoiding for a week. A notice from the apartment complex, a polite but unmistakable warning that rent was now 11 days late and that a second missed payment would trigger formal proceedings. He did the math 3 separate times, hoping a different answer would appear if he tried hard enough, and each time it came out the same. He was short by $412. He sold his grandfather's watch that week to a pawn shop off Independence Boulevard for $380, the only object he owned that had ever felt like it connected him to a version of his family that came before the hardship, and made up the rest by skipping meals for 6 days so Nia would never once suspect the refrigerator was emptier than it should have been. She never went without a single meal. That was the only rule Marcus refused to bend, no matter what else had to give. What Marcus did not do, not once, not for a single day, was stop building. In the same second-hand notebook where he used to sketch Orion's architecture, he began sketching something new. A lightweight, low-cost predictive automation framework designed specifically for small manufacturers who could never afford a system like the one he had built at Solon Dynamics. He called it, in his private notes, simply the machine, because to him it was not a product yet. It was a promise, the same kind of promise he had made to Nia years before. He worked on it after midnight, after tutoring sessions, after every rejection email, refusing to let bitterness be the last thing he felt before sleep. 7 months after he was fired, a small manufacturing client he had been quietly consulting for, a family-owned auto parts supplier in Gastonia, agreed to let him pilot an early version of his framework on their production line. Carol Whitfield had been skeptical at first, not because she doubted Marcus's ability, but because two previous affordable automation pitches from other vendors had cost her thousands of dollars and delivered nothing but downtime and frustration. "I need you to understand something," she told him the day they signed the pilot agreement, sliding the paperwork across her cluttered desk. "I can't afford to be somebody's experiment. My father built this company with his hands. If this breaks my line, it breaks a lot more than a machine." Marcus told her the truth, the same truth he had been telling himself for months. He could not promise perfection, only that he would be in the building at 5 in the morning if anything went wrong. Because he had learned the hard way what it cost to build something and hand it to people who never had to answer for its failures. Carol studied his face for a long moment, then shook his hand. It worked. Not perfectly, not immediately, but within 3 weeks it had reduced their equipment downtime by nearly a third. A number the owner, a woman named Carol Whitfield, found so remarkable that she mentioned it to a friend of hers who ran a small regional trade publication. That friend wrote a short piece, 400 words, about a former Solon Dynamics engineer quietly transforming small manufacturing operations with an affordable automation tool he built from his kitchen table. The article did not go viral. It reached maybe 6,000 readers. But one of those readers was a supply chain director at a company that, as it happened, did business with Solon Dynamics. Meanwhile, back at Solon Dynamics, the Orion platform was struggling in ways that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with the fact that the person who understood its architecture at the deepest level was gone. Trevor Enos was talented, genuinely talented, but he had learned Orion's surface, not its bones. When a critical update caused a cascading failure at 2 client sites within the same month, Trevor spent 11 days trying to trace the root cause using documentation that, it turned out, Marcus had never fully written down, because so much of what he understood lived in his instincts, refined over 6 years of building the system by hand. Ronald Vance grew furious. Clients grew furious. The board began asking uncomfortable questions about the restructuring that had, in their words, coincided suspiciously with the platform's decline. It was Carol Whitfield, of all people, who set the final chain of events in motion. She had grown close to Marcus over the months he spent helping her business. And when her cousin, who happened to sit on the board of Solon Dynamics' largest remaining client, mentioned in passing that Solon's automation platform had been failing for weeks, Carol simply said, "You should talk to the man who actually built that thing. His name is Marcus Bell." The cousin, intrigued, made a call. That call led to another call. Within 10 days, Ronald Vance found himself sitting across a conference table, not knowing that the outside consultant, his own largest client, had insisted on bringing in to diagnose Orion's failures was the same man he had walked out of the building with a cardboard box 8 months earlier. Marcus almost said no. Standing in his kitchen with the invitation email open on his laptop, Nia doing homework at the table. Behind him, he felt something close to nausea at the thought of walking back into that building. But then he thought about the 11 engineers still working under Trevor, who had nothing to do with what Vance had done to him, about the honest work those clients depended on, and about the version of himself he wanted Nia to see if she ever asked him, years from now, how he handled the worst moment of his life. He said yes. He walked into Solon Dynamics on a Tuesday morning in a gray suit he had bought secondhand and pressed himself the night before. Ronald Vance was in the conference room already, mid-sentence, explaining to the client's team that the issue was a talent transition hiccup, nothing structural, when the door opened and Marcus walked in. Vance's sentence did not just trail off, it died completely. For nearly 5 full seconds, the only sound in the room was the hum of the building's air conditioning. "Mr. Bell will be joining us for the diagnostic," the client's representative said, sliding a folder across the table. "He came highly recommended. Apparently he has some history with your platform." Trevor Ness, sitting 3 seats down, went pale in a way Marcus almost felt sorry about. Marcus did not gloat. He did not make a single comment about the past. He simply opened his laptop, pulled up the system logs Solon's IT team had sent over as part of the consulting agreement, and within 40 minutes had identified the exact fault line. A memory allocation error in the exact module Marcus had rebuilt from scratch 6 years earlier, a module that had been quietly modified 8 months ago by an engineer who did not fully understand why one particular safeguard existed, because the person who wrote it into the architecture and never got the chance to explain it was sitting in that room right now. "This safeguard isn't decorative," Marcus said, turning his laptop around so the room could see the flagged code. "I built it after we nearly lost a client's entire production line in Ohio 5 years ago. Nobody wrote that story down because nobody asked. It's the kind of thing you only understand if you were there when it almost went wrong." The fix took him 2 days. On the second afternoon, as he ran the final stress test and watched the dashboard hold steady under a load that would have broken the system a week earlier, Trevor pulled a chair over and sat down beside him without asking, the way he used to during the years Marcus taught him everything he knew. "I should have said something when it happened," Trevor said quietly, eyes on the monitor instead of Marcus. "I told myself the promotion was earned. It was easier than admitting whose work I was standing on." Marcus let the silence sit for a moment before answering. "You didn't take anything from me that they weren't already planning to take, Trevor. You just made it easier for them to hand it to you instead of somebody else. That's on them, but it's on you too a little, that you let yourself believe it was fair." Trevor did not argue. He simply nodded, and for the first time in 8 months, Marcus felt something in his chest unclench that he had not realized was still clenched. The apology, when it finally came from Ronald Vance, took considerably longer, and even then it arrived wrapped in corporate language about evolving talent strategy, rather than anything resembling the word sorry. He delivered it standing in the doorway of the conference room, arms crossed, as though the words themselves were a concession he resented making. But it did not matter to Marcus the way it might have 8 months earlier, because by then he was no longer the man who needed Solon Dynamics to see his worth. He had already built something of his own, something with his name on every line of it, something no cardboard box could ever take from him again. Carol Whitfield became his first true business partner. Within a year, the machine, officially launched under the name Clearline Automation, was running in 9 small manufacturing facilities across 3 states, each one paying a fraction of what Solon Dynamics charged for a fraction of the complexity, and getting results that mattered more to a family-owned business than any enterprise dashboard ever could. Marcus hired his first 2 employees 6 months after that. One of them was Dale, the security guard who had walked him out of Solon Dynamics with tears he had tried to hide, who had quietly kept in touch with Marcus the entire time and asked, almost sheepishly, if there was any way he could learn to code. Marcus said yes to that too. On the night Clearline Automation signed its 20th client, Marcus sat on the small back porch of the house he and Nia had finally moved into. A modest 3-bedroom with a yard big enough for the dog she had been asking for since she was 4. Nia, now 8, sat beside him with the puppy asleep across both their laps, and asked him, the way children do, completely without warning, "Daddy, were you ever scared when the bad thing happened at your old job?" Marcus thought about lying, the way he had lied every single night for 8 months to protect her from a fear that was never hers to carry. Instead, he told her the truth. "I was terrified, baby. But being scared didn't mean I had to stop. It just meant I had to keep building anyway." She nodded like this was the most obvious thing in the world, the way children accept truth without needing it dressed up, and went back to petting the dog. Marcus looked out over the yard, at the house that was theirs, at the company that carried his name on every patent filing this time. Every single one read carefully before he signed it, and understood something he would carry for the rest of his life. The people who try to erase you rarely understand that the very thing they are erasing is the thing holding the whole structure together. Take it away, and eventually the truth finds its own way back to the surface. Ronald Vance was quietly asked to step down by Solon Dynamics' board 11 months after that meeting, following 2 more client losses and a leaked internal memo revealing that his talent density audit had disproportionately targeted employees without traditional academic credentials, regardless of performance record. Trevor Ness, to his credit, reached out to Marcus personally, admitted he had let ambition outrun integrity, and asked if he could ever make it right. Marcus, who had learned that grace costs him nothing and had once been extended to him by strangers who had no reason to give it, told Trevor the same thing Carol Whitfield had told him on the worst week of his life. The work speaks eventually, if you're patient enough and honest enough to let it. Trevor eventually left Solon Dynamics himself, unable to shake the discomfort of a title he had come to feel he had not fully earned, and spent a year working as a mid-level engineer at a smaller firm, rebuilding his own sense of what his skill actually meant when it was not propped up by someone else's foundation. Marcus never gloated about that either. He simply hoped, in the quiet way he hoped for most people, that Trevor would find his own honest version of the thing Marcus had finally built for himself. If there is one thing this story asks you to carry with you, it is this: the world will not always recognize what you build while you are building it. Titles get handed to the people who photograph well in a boardroom. Credit gets filed 3 lines down on a document nobody reads closely enough. But the machine you build in the dark, out of love and stubbornness, and a promise to someone who is counting on you, does not disappear just because nobody claps for it yet. It waits, and when the moment finally comes for the truth to surface, it surfaces whole, exactly as it was always built to be. There is a framed photograph on the wall of Clearline Automation's small office today, above the desk where Dale now runs client onboarding, of a cardboard box sitting on the back seat of an old sedan. Marcus keeps it there not out of bitterness, but as a kind of compass, a reminder of exactly how far a person can travel between the worst Tuesday of their life and the version of themselves waiting quietly on the other side of it, if they simply refuse to stop building while they wait. New employees ask about it during their first week, and Marcus tells them the short version of the story. The version that ends not with the apology he never really got, but with the choice he made instead to let the humiliation be a chapter, and never, under any circumstances, the whole book. Marcus Bell never got an apology that matched what he lost. He got something better, a life he built entirely on his own terms, a daughter who watched her father refuse to let humiliation become the end of his story, and a quiet, unshakable knowledge that no one, no title, no boardroom, no cardboard box, could ever again convince him he was anything less than the one who built the machine.